Bill Wilson stared at the crumbling Victorian house, looming before him, keys dangling from his fingers. The realtor had called it a handyman's dream, more like a handyman's nightmare. But it was his nightmare now. "Well, old girl," he muttered, patting the weathered porch railing, "looks like it's just you and me." The house creaked in response as a gust of wind rattled loose shutters. At least the price had been right. Dirt cheap by Oregon standards. Sure, Millbrook wasn't exactly Portland, but for a guy with construction skills and too much time on his hands, it was perfect. The front door protested with a screech as Bill shouldered it open. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through grimy windows. The previous owners had left behind the musty perfume of moth balls and abandonment, along with some questionable wallpaper choices. "First thing to go is that wall," he decided, eyeing the partition that chopped up what could be an impressive living room. His footsteps echoed on hardwood floors as he circled the space, already mapping out improvements in his mind. The next morning found Bill armed with a sledgehammer and protective gear, ready to start demolition. He'd spent half the night studying the house's original blueprints, confirming the wall wasn't load-bearing. Time to make some noise. He swung the sledgehammer, and the first impact sent a satisfying crack through the plaster. Another swing revealed ancient wooden lot beneath. 3 hours in several garbage bags of debris later, Bill hit something that didn't sound right. The sledgehammer bounced back with a metallic clang instead of the expected thud of wood. What the hell? He cleared away more plaster, revealing something that definitely wasn't part of any standard wall construction he'd ever seen. A smooth curved surface gleamed dully behind the wooden slats. Bill's pulse quickened as he carefully removed more of the surrounding wall. The metallic surface expanded into what looked like a doorframe, but one made of materials he'd never encountered before. The metal, if it was metal, had an iridescent quality that shifted colors when viewed from different angles. "Okay, this is weird." He ran his fingers along the edge, jerking back when light suddenly flickered to life within the frame. A seam appeared down the center, and with a soft hiss, the frame split apart to reveal a hidden chamber. Holy! Bill's breath caught in his throat. The space beyond the wall was roughly the size of a walk-in closet, but instead of clothes or storage, it contained what could only be described as a glass coffin. The crystalline structure pulsed with a soft blue glow that grew stronger as he approached. Common sense screamed at him to back away, call someone, the police, the FBI, hell, maybe NASA. Instead, he found himself drawn closer, squinting through the translucent surface. "Oh my God!" He stumbled backward as he made out a figure inside. A woman, but unlike any he'd ever seen. Her skin was a pale shade of green, offset by flowing black hair that seemed to float in whatever medium filled the chamber. As he watched in stunned disbelief, her eyes snapped open, brilliant golden irises fixing directly on him. The crystal surface began to dissolve, evaporating like morning dew. The woman sat up in one fluid motion, regarding him with an expression of curious disdain. She opened her mouth and spoke in a voice that somehow managed to be both melodic and slightly mechanical. "Really, of all the species that could have found me, it had to be one of you soft ones." Bill gaped, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. What? She tilted her head, studying him like a particularly interesting but slightly dim specimen. "Your epidermis is remarkably inefficient. How do you manage not to puncture yourselves on everything?" What now? Bill managed to find his voice. "Who? What are you?" "Zilia, Observer, 3rd Class, Galactic Monitoring Division." She swung her legs over the side of the chamber, revealing what appeared to be some kind of silvery bodysuit, though given how long I appear to have been in stasis, I suppose my rank is somewhat irrelevant now. The alien woman, Zilia, attempted to stand and immediately stumbled. Bill's reflex is kicked in before his brain could catch up, and he found himself steadying her with hands on her shoulders. Her skin felt smooth and cool like polished stone. "Careful there," he said automatically, then froze as those golden eyes fixed on him at close range. "How interesting." She poked his chest with one slender finger. "Your internal support structure appears adequate despite your squishy exterior, and you generate significant thermal energy." Her hand splayed against his sternum. "Fascinating." Bill cleared his throat and carefully stepped back. "Right so, alien hut, if you mean. Am I not indigenous to this primitive rock?" "Obviously." She took another experimental step this time, maintaining her balance, though I must say you've made remarkable progress. Since my deployment, you're wearing synthetic fibers, and I detect refined metals in your crude demolition implement. She gestured at his sledgehammer. Thanks, I think. Bill ran a hand through his dust-covered hair. Look, maybe we should sit down and owe your follicular response to stress. She reached up and ruffled his hair with childlike enthusiasm. The individual strands actually adjust position. How delightfully inefficient. Okay, personal space. Bill ducked away from her. Exploring hands, we need to establish some ground rules here. Rules. She wrinkled her nose, which was just a shade darker green than the rest of her face. I'm an advanced being from a civilization that mastered interstellar travel while your species was still arguing over which end of a rock was sharper. I don't follow rules. Yeah, well, this is my house, and in my house. Bill stopped short as her words sank in weight. How long exactly have you been in that thing? Zia, his expression turned thoughtful. What's your current planetary rotation count? You mean what year is it, if that's how you primitive beings track temporal progression? Yes. It's 2025. Her golden eyes widened slightly. Oh dear, it seems my stasis chamber may have malfunctioned. I was only supposed to remain in observation mode for one of your centuries. Not. She trailed off, doing calculations in her head. How many centuries are we talking about here? I was inserted into this structure during what you would call the year 1725. She said it casually, as if discussing last week's weather. Bill sat down hard on a pile of demolished plaster. 300 years. You've been in my wall for 300 years. Technically, it wasn't your wall until approximately 24 of your hours ago. She began pacing the room, examining everything with intense curiosity. Oh, you've maintained some of the original architectural elements. How charmingly retro-focused. Please. Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. Why exactly were you put here in the first place? I told you, observation. She picked up a piece of plaster and sniffed it. My people have been monitoring various developing worlds for millennia. We insert observers at key points in a species' development to gather data and, if necessary, intervene before they accidentally destroy themselves. And you got stuck here in Oregon. She tested the word. Your provincial territorial designations. No, I chose this location specifically because it was remote enough to avoid detection, while still allowing me to monitor your species' western expansion across this continent. She sat down the plaster with a disapproving look, though. I appear to have missed most of the interesting parts. Bill struggled to wrap his mind around everything. So what happens now? Are your people coming to get you? A shadow passed across her features that could be problematic. My communication array was integrated into the stasis chamber, which appears to have degraded significantly over time, and given how long I've been out of contact. She squared her shoulders. It seems I may be temporarily stranded here with me. Bill looked around at his half-demolished living room. In my fixer-upper. Indeed. She brightened suddenly. Though this could be quite educational, I've never had the opportunity for such close observation of your species before. Your biological functions alone will provide fascinating data. Yeah, that's not happening. No observing of my biological functions. Don't be modest. I've already cataloged 17 unique physiological responses just in our brief interaction. For instance, your epidermis flushes with increased blood flow when you're uncomfortable. Like right now. Bill fought down, said flush. Okay, new rule number 1, no analyzing me without permission. There you go with rules again. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, complete with an exaggerated head movement that suggested she'd learned the gesture from old movies. Fine. I suppose I'll have to rely on external observation. Only though you should know your heart rate increases by approximately 12% every time I move closer to you. As if to demonstrate, she stepped into his personal space again. Bill backed up until he hit the wall. Rule number 2, he said firmly. Appropriate distance between persons at all times. Define appropriate. At least arm's length, unless specifically invited closer. She considered this, then held out her arm. My arms are approximately 15% longer than yours. Shall we use mine as the standard measurement? Before Bill could respond, a sharp knock at the front door made them both freeze. Mr. Wilson, a female voice, called out. It's Sarah from next door. I heard all the banging and wanted to make sure everything's okay in there. Bill looked at Zelia in panic. She looked back, with what could only be described as mischievous interest. "Oh good," she whispered, my first chance to observe human social interactions. Up close, no bad. Alien, stay here and be quiet. He pointed firmly at the ground. She crossed her arms. "I don't respond well." A command, soft one. "Another knock, Mr. Wilson, just a minute," he called out, then turned back to Zelia. "Please, I'm begging you, let me handle this, and then we can figure out what to do next." She sighed dramatically. "Fine, but only because your stress responses are becoming concerning." Bill hurried to the front door, trying to compose himself. He opened it to find his new neighbor, a friendly-looking woman in her 50s, holding a plate of cookies. "Hey, sorry, I was right in the middle of demo work." He tried to casually block the doorway with his body. "I brought welcome to the neighborhood cookies," Sarah said, peering past him with friendly curiosity. "Sounds like you're making good progress in there." "Oh, you have no idea," Bill muttered. "What was that I said? Thanks for the cookies. That's really nice of you." "What fascinating circular nutrient discs." Celia's voice came from directly behind him. "Are they meant to be decorative or medicinal?" Bill closed his eyes in defeat as Sarah's jaw dropped when he opened them again. Zelia had somehow squeezed past him and was examining the cookies with scientific intensity. "Oh," Sarah blinked rapidly. "I didn't realize you had company." "She's my cousin," Bill said desperately. "From overseas." "Very overseas," Zelia agreed cheerfully. "I've traveled approximately 147 light years to be here." "She means Ireland," Bill cut in. "She's jet-lagged. And I'm really into performance art." Hence he gestured vaguely at her green skin. "How wonderful." Sarah's Midwestern politeness kicked in full force. "You know, my book club would love to hear about your performance art sometime." "That sounds absolutely fascinating," Zelia said, reaching for a cookie. "I'd be delighted to discuss your primitive social bonding rituals over processed carbohydrates." Bill grabbed her wrist before she could take one. "Maybe another time. We've got a lot of unpacking to do." "Thanks again for the cookies." He somehow managed to get the door closed without further incident, then rounded on Zelia. "What happened to staying quiet?" "I was conducting research." She was still staring at the cookies with intense interest. "Are these typical peace offerings among your kind? They appear to contain an alarming amount of sucrose." Bill set the plate aside before she could start analyzing them molecule by molecule. "Okay, we need to establish some serious ground rules about interacting with humans." "More rules?" She flopped onto his dusty couch with surprising grace. "You're rather obsessed with regulatory frameworks for such an underdeveloped species," says the alien who got stuck in a wall for 3 centuries. The moment the words left his mouth, Bill regretted them. A flash of genuine hurt crossed her features before she covered it with a haughty expression. "My containment was intentional mostly." She picked at a loose thread on her bodysuit. "The duration may have been unexpected, but I was fulfilling my duty to my people." Something in her tone made Bill sit down beside her, though he maintained proper arm's-length distance. And now she turned those unsettling golden eyes on him. "Now I find myself alone on a planet that has evolved far beyond my parameters, with no immediate way to contact my people, and my only point of contact is a soft-skinned demolitions expert who appears to run entirely on anxiety and regulatory impulses." "Hey, I resent that." Bill paused. "The anxiety part, not the demolition expert part." "That's actually pretty accurate." To his surprise, she laughed, a genuinely musical sound that seemed to brighten the dusty room. "Perhaps we got off to an incorrect initiating sequence. Shall we attempt to restart?" "You mean start over?" "Sure." He held out his hand. "Bill Wilson, renovation enthusiast and accidental alien discoverer." She looked at his hand curiously, then mimicked the gesture. "Zelia, observer, 3rd class. Currently unemployed due to excessive stasis duration." Her hand was cool in his, but not unpleasantly so. As they shook, something sparked between them. Literally, a small static discharge made them both jump. "Fascinating." Zelia's eyes lit up. "Your primitive bioelectric field actually generated enough potential difference to rule number 3. Bill interrupted. "No scientific analysis of handshakes." She withdrew her hand with a smirk. "You realize I'm mentally recording everything for later study, regardless of your rules?" "Yeah, well, I'm mentally recording everything for my future therapist, so we're even." That earned another laugh. "You know, for a soft one, You're surprisingly entertaining. Perhaps being stranded here won't be entirely tedious. After all, Bill looked around at his demolished living room, the mysterious high-tech chamber in his wall, and the green-skinned alien making herself at home on his couch. Tedious is definitely not the word I'd use. The first 24 hours of living with an alien proved more challenging than Bill had anticipated. For starters, Zelia's definition of sleep involved hovering cross-legged 3 feet above his guest bed while running diagnostic protocols. It's creepy, he told her over breakfast. The next morning I came to check on you and nearly had a heart attack. Your cardiovascular system seems remarkably fragile, she observed, poking at the bowl of cereal he'd given her. Is this substance meant to be consumed, or is it some form of tactical training? The small shapes appear designed for maximum choking hazard. It's Cheerios, just watch what I do, he demonstrated, eating a spoonful. Zelia mimicked his actions with scientific precision. Then her golden eyes widened. Oh, the structures dissolve upon contact with oral enzymes. Primitive, but oddly satisfying. Thanks. I think Bill washed as she proceeded to analyze each individual Cheerio before eating it. So about your mission, you mentioned being an observer. Yes, though clearly my activation protocols malfunction. She frowned at her spoon. I was meant to monitor your species development and intervene only if you showed signs of imminent self-destruction. And did we constantly? But you also showed remarkable resilience, like these circular nutrient vessels, deeply flawed design, yet somehow functional. Before Bill could defend Earth's breakfast cereals, a high-pitched whine emanated from the hidden chamber in his wall. Zelia's head snapped up. Oh dear, what's oh dear? I don't like oh dear. It seems my stasis pod's emergency beacon has finally finished its boot sequence. She set down her spoon with careful precision. This could be problematic. Defined problematic. The signal is likely being picked up by every piece of monitoring equipment within its 000-mile radius. She tilted her head, listening. And given how much your technology has advanced, I estimate we have approximately 3 hours before various authorities begin arriving to investigate. Bill's cereal turned to ash in his mouth. What kind of authorities? Government agencies, scientific institutions, possibly military organizations. She brightened. On the positive side, this will provide excellent opportunities to observe your species' power structures and bureaucratic responses to unexpected situations. Yeah, that's not happening. Bill stood up. We need to hide that pod thing, the quantum-sealed stasis chamber, containing 3 centuries of observational data and advanced alien technology. Zelia raised an elegant eyebrow. I suppose we could throw a blanket over it. Not helping, he began pacing. Can't you just turn it off? The emergency protocols were designed to be tamper-proof, though. She drummed her fingers on the table thoughtfully. I might be able to modify the signal if I had access to more modern technology. What's your position on minor theft of government satellites? Absolutely not, you humans, and your arbitrary moral restrictions, she sighed. Dramatically fine. Do you at least have a computational device I could interface with? Bill retrieved his laptop, trying not to wince as Zelia immediately began dismantling it. That cost me $2,000. How charming, you still use currency. Her fingers moved in blur, rearranging circuits and adding components that seemed to materialize from her bodysuit. There. This should buy us some time by scrambling the signal source location. Should 92% probability, possibly 93 if we account for solar flare interference. She reassembled the laptop with impossible speed, though we should probably prepare for the 8% chance of failure. How do we prepare for that? A sharp knock at the door answered his question. They froze, staring at each other as a stern voice called out, Mr. Wilson, this is Agent Roberts with the FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions about some unusual energy readings in the area. Quick act. Normal. Bill is then immediately regretted his choice of words as Zelia's face lit up with scientific interest. Define normal human behavior parameters, she whispered back, already striking an exaggerated pose that looked like she learned it from a 1950s sitcom. Another knock. Mr. Wilson, we know you're home. Just a minute, Bill called out, then turned to Zill in panic. Okay, new plan, hide in the bathroom while I don't. Be absurd, she interrupted, reaching for her neck. Something clicked, and shimmered, and suddenly her green skin took on a more human tone. Her bodysuit transformed into jeans and a sweater. Even her golden eyes shifted to a more mundane hazel chameleon circuits. Standard issue for all observers, Bill gaped. You could do that this whole time. Of course, though, I find your species of appearance terribly boring. She wrinkled her now human nose. Well, aren't you going to answer the door, dear cousin from Ireland? The knocking grew more insistent. Bill took a deep breath and went to open. It's Zelia. Close behind him, two men in dark suits stood on his porch, looking exactly like every FBI agent from every movie ever made. Mr. Wilson, the taller one, held up a badge. I'm Agent Roberts. This is Agent Miller. We're investigating some unusual electromagnetic activity in the area. Really? Bill tried to sound casual. Haven't noticed anything unusual, mind if we come in and take a look around? Before Bill could respond, Zelia pushed past him with an alarmingly convincing Irish accent. Oh, is this about the microwave? I told him it was acting strange, didn't I, Cousin Billy? The agents exchanged glances. Agent Miller consulted a tablet. And you are Zelda O'Brien, she said smoothly, visiting from Dublin. I'm writing my thesis on American renovation techniques. She gestured at the construction debris visible through the door. Fascinating stuff. Really, the cultural implications of load-bearing walls alone could fill volumes. Bill fought to keep his face neutral as the agents visibly struggled to process this information. Roberts cleared his throat. Miss O'Brien, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with advanced technology. Oh, you mean like this? Zelia held up Bill's mangled laptop. Sorry about that. Was trying to get it to run proper European voltage. Bit of a mess now, isn't it? The agents stared at the laptop, then at their readings, then at each other. Miller muttered something about interference from renovation equipment. Roberts looked like he was developing a headache. Mind if we come in and verify there's nothing else unusual? Bill started to object, but Zelia was already ushering them inside with enthusiastic commentary about Irish versus American electrical standards. He followed, trying not to look at the partially demolished wall hiding the stasis chamber. As you can see, my cousin's quite the handyman. Zelia chatted away as the agent swept the room with various devices. Though between you and me, his choice of wall colors is absolutely alien. I mean, who picks top in this century? Bill choked slightly. Agent Roberts paused his scanning to frown at her. Miss O'Brien, are you aware that tampering with federal investigations is a serious offense? Zelia's eyes widened with innocent concern. Oh dear, his interior design regulated by the FBI. Now how fascinating. That'll be a whole chapter in my thesis. Miller's detectors started beeping as he approached the demolished wall. Bill's heart rate spiked, but Zelia smoothly stepped between the agent and the hidden chamber. Careful, they're load-bearing dust. You know, terribly dangerous. We had 3 houses call up in Dublin just last week from improper dust management. Load-bearing dust. Miller looked at his partner in confusion. Oh yes, it's a real problem in old houses. Something to do with temporal compression of particulate matter. Very technical. I could explain the quantum mechanics if you like. That won't be necessary. Roberts cut in hastily. He clearly decided that pursuing this investigation wasn't worth a headache. Mr. Wilson, if you notice any other unusual activity, please contact our office, of course. Bill managed, though, with all this renovation, probably lots of weird readings, right? Electrical stuff, old wiring indeed. Roberts couldn't seem to get his business card out fast enough. Come on, Miller, we got other sites to check. As soon as the agent's car disappeared down the street, Bill collapsed onto the couch. That was you. Were brilliant. Zelia's human disguise shimmered away, revealing her usual green self. I know. The Irish accent was particularly inspired, don't you think? I compiled it from 17 different cultural reference points. You could have warned me about the chameleon circuit thing. Where's the fun in that? She perched on the arm of the couch, studying him with those unnerving golden eyes. Your stress responses were quite informative. Did you know your left eye twitches exactly 3 times per minute when you're lying? It does not 4 times when you're being defensive. She grinned. Humans are adorably transparent, says the alien who just turned herself into the most stereotypical Irish graduate student ever. Stereotypes are useful camouflage. Your species tends to see what it expects to see. She tilted her head thoughtfully. though I must admit direct interaction is proving far more educational than mere observation. For instance, your current physiological responses suggest increased comfort with my presence despite the recent stress. Fascinating. Bill realized she was right. He had gotten more comfortable around her, even finding her scientific analysis of everything endearing rather than annoying, which was probably a bad sign. So what now? He asked, changing the subject. More authority is going to show up. Probably my signal scramble bought us some time, but she gestured at the wall. That stasis chamber contains technology your species won't be ready to handle for at least another century. We need to either disable it completely or move it somewhere secure. Great, so we just need to hide a massive alien artifact while every government agency in the country is looking for it. No pressure. Actually, I have an idea about that. Zelia's eyes gleamed with what Bill was learning to recognize as her about to suggest something crazy. How do you feel about road trips? Number? Absolutely not. Think about it. We could observe human customs across multiple geographic regions, gather data on social interactions in various settings, and most importantly, she leaned closer, her voice dropping. Conspirator, I've always wanted to try one of those circular bread and protein constructs. A hamburger? You want to risk federal prosecution for fast food? Don't be ridiculous. We'd also be protecting your species from premature exposure to advanced technology. She paused. The hamburger would just be a bonus. Before Bill could argue further, multiple cars could be heard pulling up outside. Zelia peeked through the window, and her expression turned serious. Decision time. Soft one. Those aren't FBI agents out there. They're military, and they're carrying equipment that could actually detect my technology. She held out her hand. Want to see how fast I can hotwire that primitive transport device in your driveway? Bill looked at his half-renovated house, then at the mysterious alien who turned his life upside down in less than 2 days. Common sense screamed at him to turn her in, let the authorities handle it, go back to his normal life. Instead, he found himself taking her hand. My truck's not primitive. It's a classic. Her smile could have powered a small city. Of course it is now. Shall we make what you humans call a dramatic exit? Don't suppose you have any other hidden alien tech that could help with that? Oh, Billy, she squeezed his hand, sending an actual electric tingle up his arm. You have no idea what I'm capable of. His boots hit his front porch. Zelia pulled him toward the back door, her golden eyes dancing with excitement. And despite everything, the danger, the insanity of it all, the complete derailment of his renovation plans, Bill found himself grinning back. After all, how many people got to go on a road trip with an alien? They made it to Bill's truck just as the front door splintered open. Zelia's hands moved in a blur over the ignition, while Bill ducked down in the passenger seat, his heart threatening to burst through his chest. You know, she commented casually as the engine roared to life. For a species that claims to value privacy, you're remarkably enthusiastic about breaking into each other's dwellings. Less commentary, more driving. Bill risked a glance back at his house. Armed figures in tactical gear were spreading across his yard. They're going to. The rest of his sentence was lost as Zelia floored the accelerator. The truck fishtailed onto the street tires, screaming. Bill grabbed the dashboard. Where did you learn to drive? I downloaded the basic principles from your vehicle's computational system. She took a corner at speeds that defied physics, though I may have made some improvements to the engine while I was connected to it. What? The truck's speedometer suddenly clicked past numbers it definitely shouldn't have been able to reach. Oh God, relax. Soft one. I calculated the optimal escape route based on local traffic patterns, law enforcement response times, and the structural limitations of your primitive roadways. She grinned as she threaded between 2 cars with millimeters to spare. There's only a 12% chance of catastrophic failure. That's not relaxing. Red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. Zia's golden eyes narrowed. Interesting. Your authorities are more persistent than my data suggested. She pressed something on the dashboard that definitely hadn't been there before. Let's test their adaptability, shall we? The truck's engine made a sound that no Earth-based machinery should be capable of. Bill's stomach lurched as they accelerated to speeds that made the pursuing vehicles look like they were standing still. What did you do to my truck? Minor quantum modifications. Don't worry, it's mostly reversible. She glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. You know your stress responses are remarkably consistent. Most humans would have lost consciousness by now. Give me time, Bill muttered, keeping his eyes firmly closed as they took another impossible turn. Where are we even going? East initially, then south, then possibly through another dimension depending on how the phase converters hold up. His eyes snapped open. Another? What, kidding? Mostly, she winked at him, though I did notice a fascinating temporal anomaly in Nevada that might be worth investigating. No anomalies, we need an actual plan. Bill forced himself to think past the terror of their escape. We need supplies somewhere to hide the stasis chamber, and food, Zelia interrupted excitedly. I believe this is the perfect opportunity to experience one of your eating establishments. The ones with the golden arches seem particularly prevalent in your cultural references. Bill stared at her. They were currently fleeing from multiple government agencies at physically impossible speeds in his quantum-modified truck, and she wanted McDonald's. You're insane. Merely curious. Also, your blood sugar levels indicate you should eat soon. She somehow managed to make their next turn even more terrifying, and we've successfully evaded immediate pursuit, so this would be the optimal time for a refueling stop. As if to prove her point, the lights in their rearview mirror had indeed disappeared. The truck's speed decreased something, approaching legal as Zelia guided them onto a highway. Bill didn't recognize. How far have we come? Approximately 127 nil. She looked entirely too pleased with herself. Your vehicle performs quite admirably with the right modifications, though we should probably acquire alternate transport soon as they'll be tracking this one. Bill slumped in his seat as the adrenaline began to wear off. This is really happening, isn't it? I'm actually on the run from the government with an alien who wants to try fast food. Indeed, isn't it exciting? Zelia's enthusiasm was infectious despite the circumstances. Think of all the data we'll collect, the social interactions, the regional variations in human behavior, the questionable nutritional choices. You're enjoying this way too much. Of course I am. Do you know how boring it was just watching your species stumble towards civilization for 3 centuries? Now I get to participate. She bounced slightly in her seat. Oh look, Golden Arch is ahead. Shall we test their drive-through protocols? Bill was about to argue when his stomach growled traitorously. Fine, but you need to maintain your human disguise and let me do the ordering. The last thing we need is you analyze the chemical composition of a Big Mac. Out loud, spoil sport. But she activated her chameleon circuit, once again becoming the unremarkable Zelda persona. Though I reserve the right to document the experience for my research, just try to act normal. Define normal, like a regular human getting fast food. So I should complain about the wait time, make unnecessary comments about dietary restrictions, and take pictures of my meal for social media validation. Bill blinked. Have you been studying human behavior through Instagram, among other sources? She guided the truck into the drive-through lane with surprising restraint. Your species need to document every mundane aspect of existence. It's fascinating. Did you know humans post approximately 1.8 billion images of food per day? That can't be right. I may have rounded down. She peered at the menu, bored with intense concentration. Oh, they serve breakfast all day now. The cultural implications of time-flexible meal categories alone could fill a research paper. The speaker crackled to life. Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? Bill leaned across Zelia to speak clearly. 2 quarter-pounders with cheese, 2 large fries, and 2 Cokes, please. Would you like to try our new? No thank you, just the basics. He sat back, then noticed Zelia's expression. What you ordered for me? Her tone was unreadable. Is this a human courtship ritual I was unaware of? Bill felt his face heat up. What? No, I just figured we should keep it simple for your first fast food experience. Interesting. Your elevated heart rate suggests please pull forward to the first window. The speaker interrupted mercifully. As they waited behind another car, Zelia continued to study him with disturbing intensity. Your species has very complex social dynamics around food sharing. Did you know that in some cultures ordering food for someone is considered quite intimate? Can we focus on not getting caught by the government instead of analyzing my ordering habits? Multitasking is one of my many talents. She smiled in a way that made Bill's heart do something complicated. Along with high-speed pursuits, quantum mechanics, and apparently making you blush, I'm not. He caught sight of his reflection in the side that's just leftover adrenaline from the escape, of course. It is she pulled forward to the window with exaggerated care, just like your elevated pulse. Whenever I do this, she briefly dropped her human disguise, golden eyes flashing before resuming it as the window opened. Bill managed to pay for their food without incident, though he was acutely aware of Zelia analyzing every aspect of the transaction. As they pulled into a secluded corner of the parking lot, she immediately began examining her burger. With scientific precision, fascinating construction, the layering of proteins and vegetables suggests an attempt at balanced nutrition, yet the caloric content. She took a careful bite, then her eyes widened. Oh my good, the combination of flavors and textures is remarkable. She took another larger bite. No wonder your species is so obsessed with documenting these experiences. Bill couldn't help smiling as she demolished the rest of her burger with decidedly un-Alan enthusiasm. So while we're having this totally normal fast food experience, want to tell me more about this temporal anomaly in Nevada? She paused mid-furry. You're actually considering investigating it? Well, we need somewhere to hide that stasis chamber, right? Might as well be somewhere interesting, he shrugged. Besides, I've always wanted to see Area 51. CI's laugh was worth whatever trouble they were about to get into. Oh, Billy, Area 51 is so pedestrian. I'm talking about something much more fascinating. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Conspirator, how do you feel about quantum tunnels under abandoned mining towns? I feel like I'm going to regret asking about them. Probably. She stole one of his fries with a grin. But isn't that what road trips are for? Making questionable decisions and collecting data. As she launched into an explanation of quantum physics that somehow involved both Elvis Presley and desert tortoises, Bill realized he was actually looking forward to whatever insanity lay ahead. Sure, they were fugitives from multiple government agencies. His truck had been turned into some kind of quantum hot rod, and he was pretty sure he was developing inappropriate feelings for an alien scientist, but at least it wasn't boring. The desert stretched endlessly ahead as Bill's quantum-modified truck ate up the miles Zelia had insisted on driving, claiming her enhanced reflexes and multi-dimensional awareness made her better suited for the task. Bill suspected she just enjoyed testing how fast they could go without breaking the laws of physics. So about this quantum tunnel, he ventured, watching the speedometer hover at numbers that shouldn't exist. What exactly are we looking for? Oh, you'll know it when you see it. Zelia had dropped her human skies once they left populated areas, her green skin almost glowing in the late afternoon sun. The dimensional barriers are particularly thin in certain parts of Nevada. Something about the combination of nuclear testing and native geomagnetic fields created these fascinating pocket universes, right pocket universes in Nevada. Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. And this helps us hide your stasis chamber. How? Think about it logically. She took a corner at speeds that made his stomach lurch. We're better to hide advanced alien technology than in a place that technically doesn't exist in your dimension. You know, when I bought that house, my biggest worry was finding asbestos in the walls. Now I'm discussing pocket universes with an alien fugitive. Zelia grinned. Significantly more interesting than asbestos, wouldn't you say? Before Bill could respond, something on the dashboard started blinking. The display he definitely hadn't installed showed a complex pattern of symbols he couldn't read. Ah, perfect timing. Celia's golden eyes lit up with scientific excitement. We're approaching the anomaly. You might want to hold on to something. Why would I need to? The world suddenly twisted sideways. Colors that shouldn't exist flashed past the windows. Bill's ears popped as reality seemed to fold in on itself. Then, just as suddenly, everything snapped back to normal, except where are we? The desert remained, but everything else had changed. The highway had become a dirt road. The scattered scrub brush had been replaced by crystalline formations that pulsed with internal light, and in the distance, instead of mountains, a massive structure rose from the sand, like some impossible combination of ancient temple and futuristic city. Welcome to what your government calls Site 223, Zelia announced proudly, though its real designation is considerably more complex and involves several frequencies outside your audible range. Bill stared at the otherworldly landscape. This is still Nevada, Right, technically, we're in a quantum overlay of Nevada, a sort of dimensional pocket created by the intersection of multiple reality streams. She pointed at the crystalline formations. Those are quantum echo crystals. They form wherever reality gets too thin. Beautiful, aren't they? They're impossible only from a three-dimensional perspective. She guided the truck toward the distant structure from a quantum mechanical viewpoint. They perfectly logical manifestations of collapsed probability waves. You're doing that thing again, where you explain something by making it more confusing. Her laugh echoed through the truck's cabin. Would you prefer I use smaller words? I prefer we talk about why there's what looks like an alien city in the middle of secret NADA. Oh, that's not a city. Celia's expression turned more serious. It's a research station, one of several people established on your planet centuries ago, though this one seems to have evolved somewhat unexpectedly. During my stasis period, the structure grew larger as they approached. Bill could now see that it wasn't a single building, but rather a complex network of interconnected towers and platforms that seemed to defy gravity. Some sections appeared ancient, built from stone and metal, while others looked like they were made from pure light. Those weren't in your mission briefing. Where were they? No. Zelia frowned slightly. The station was supposed to be abandoned after the initial observation period. This level of development suggests continued occupation. You mean there might be more aliens here? Possibly, though given the quantum signature readings, they may not be exactly what you consider aliens. She glanced at him. How comfortable are you with the concept of parallel evolution? About as comfortable as I am with everything else that's happened today. That's the spirit. She brought the truck to a stop at what appeared to be some kind of entrance. Now there's a small chance we might encounter versions of ourselves from alternate timelines. Try not to make direct eye contact. If that happens, temporal paradoxes can be so messy. Bill stepped out of the truck on shaky legs, trying to process everything. He was seeing the air felt different here, thicker somehow, with an electric charge that made his skin tingle. So your plan is to hide your stasis chamber in a secret quantum research station that might be full of alternate reality versions of ourselves. When you say it like that, it sounds crazy. Zelia joined him, her green skin taking on new highlights in the strange light. I prefer to think of it as efficiently utilizing existing interdimensional infrastructure. You're enjoying this way too much, of course. I am. She grabbed his hand, sending an actual electric shock through his system. Come on, let's go meet the neighbors, assuming they exist in our current probability matrix. As she pulled him toward the entrance, Bill couldn't help noticing how perfectly her hand fit in his, despite her extra finger. He also couldn't help noticing how the quantum crystals seemed to pulse and sin with his heartbeat whenever she smiled at him. You know, he said as they approached what looked like a door made of solid light, when I decided to renovate that house, I was hoping to meet someone special. I just didn't expect them to be from another planet. Zelia turned to him with an expression that made his heart do quantum physics of its own. Who says I'm from another planet? Maybe I'm from another you in another timeline who made different choices and ended up exploring the stars instead of renovating houses. Is that actually possible in an infinite multiverse? Her golden eyes sparkled. Anything is possible, even a human and an alien finding each other, because he decided to tear down the right wall at the right moment. Before Bill could respond to that surprisingly romantic interpretation of their situation, the light door began to hum. Symbols similar to the ones on his truck's modified dashboard appeared in the air. Ah, good. Zelia's face lit up with scientific excitement. They're still using the old access protocols. This should be interesting. Define interesting. Well, either we're about to meet some fascinating interdimensional beings who can help us hide the stasis chamber, or we're about to trigger a quantum cascade that could collapse this entire pocket universe. Bill stared at her. Those seemed like very different outcomes, only from a linear temporal perspective. She squeezed his hand, ready to find out which one we get, as the door of light began to open, revealing what looked like an impossible space full of more impossible things. Bill realized he was actually grinning. You know what I think I am, after all, he thought as they stepped through the doorway together. How many home renovation projects end up involving quantum physics and romance across dimensions? The interior of the research station defied every law of physics. Bill thought he knew corridors twisted in impossible directions, rooms existed in multiple places at once in windows, showed views of different times and dimensions. Your brain is trying to process five-dimensional space through three-dimensional perception, Zelia explained as she led him through the geometric nightmare. Try not to think too hard about it. Too late, Bill stumbled as a hallway suddenly decided to be vertical. How are you so comfortable with all this? My species exist partially in quantum space already. She caught him before he could fall. Her touch, sending familiar tingles through his arm. Though I must admit the way they have modified this place is impressive. The temporal architecture alone. She trailed off as they entered what appeared to be a vast central chamber. Multiple variants of reality overlapped here, creating a kaleidoscopic effect that made Bill's head spin. In the center, a familiar crystalline structure pulsed with energy. Is that another stasis chamber? Zelia's grip on his hand tightened, but the quantum signature is different. Before she could explain further, a voice echoed through the chamber, or rather multiple versions of the same voice, all slightly out of sync. We were wondering when you'd arrive. A figure stepped out of the quantum shadows. No, multiple figures, all overlapping and shifting, but all recognizable as your me. Celia breathed. Or rather, versions of me from different timelines. The quantum shifted. Zelia smiled in unison. We are what you could have been, what you might be, and what you never were. Just as they gestured at Bill, is all possible versions of himself. Bill's head throbbed as he tried to process what he was seeing. Different versions of himself flickered at the edges of his vision, some in suits, some in uniforms, some in outfits that couldn't exist in his reality. This is impossible, he muttered. Only from a linear perspective. His Zelia and her quantum echo said simultaneously. She shot them an annoyed look. Stop that, you're making it worse. The other Zelas laughed, a sound that rippled through multiple dimensions. We remember being like you, so certain of the boundaries between possible and impossible, between alien and human, between love and duty. Bill felt his Zelia when H started thinking of her as his tense beside him. You know why we're here, of course. The stasis chamber, the pursuit, the growing connection between observer and observed. The quantum zealous gestured at the crystalline structure. But what you haven't realized yet is why this particular point in space-time drew you here, because it's a secure location to hide the chamber, because it's where every version of you makes the same choice. The chamber in the center pulsed brighter, and suddenly Bill could see them, countless versions of himself and Zelia in countless realities, all coming together in this moment. Some were human and alien, some were both alien, some were both human, but all of them. Oh, his Zelia said softly. The quantum zealous nodded. In every timeline where you find each other, you choose each other. It's one of the few universal constants we've discovered. Bill turned to his Zelia, the real one, the one whose hand was still sending electric tingles up his arm. Her golden eyes met his, and suddenly the quantum physics and parallel dimensions didn't matter. You know, he said, for a highly advanced alien scientist, you can be pretty oblivious. She tilted her head. What are you? He kissed her. The quantum crystals around them pulsed in sync with their heartbeats as her initial surprise melted into enthusiasm. Her skin was cool against his, but her lips were warm, and the electric tension that had been building between them since she stepped out of that stasis chamber finally had somewhere to go. When they finally broke apart, the quantum zelos were smiling knowingly, like we said, universal constant. That was. Zelia touched her lips wonderingly. Fascinating. We should definitely gather more data points. Bill laughed. Only you would treat kissing like a science experiment. Of course, the variables involved in human pair bonding are incredibly complex. We'll need extensive research to. She caught his expression and smiled. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Yes, but it's kind of adorable. The chamber pulsed again, and the quantum zelia spoke in unison. The pursuers are closing in even here. You need to make your choice soon, right? They were still fugitives, still had a stasis chamber to hide, still had to figure out how to escape multiple government agencies across multiple dimensions. What choice? Bill asked, though he had a feeling he knew. Stay here in this quantum pocket where you'll be safe but separate from your own reality. Or ... or take our chances out there. Celia finished. She looked at Bill. Together he pretended to think about it. Well, the renovation already over budget. Anyway, her smile could have powered the entire quantum station. Is that a yes? I'm crazy enough to go on the run across dimensions with an alien scientist who thinks kissing needs peer. Review excellent. She pulled him in for another kiss, this one sending actual sparks flying from the nearby crystals, though I feel I should point out that peer review typically requires multiple independent observations. The quantum zealous laughed again. You always choose the difficult path. Would you expect anything else from us? Zelia's golden eyes sparkled with mischief. Now about that stasis chamber, the quantum research station's alarms blared across multiple dimensions, simultaneously creating a discordant symphony that made Bill teeth ache. They'd breached the outer quantum barrier. The overlap versions of Zelia began to fade. You need to leave now. But the stasis chamber his Zelia started will be safe here, scattered across enough quantum possibilities to be useless to them. The quantum echoes gestured urgently. Go take the northwest corridor. It'll put you back in your timeline about 50 miles from here. Bill grabbed Alia's hand. Come on, we can discuss quantum mechanics after we're not arrested by interdimensional government agents. They sprinted through the impossible geometry of the station reality, bending around them as they ran. Behind them, voices echoed in multiple frequencies, some human, some decidedly not this way. Zelia pulled him through what looked like a solid wall that turned out to be liquid light. The quantum shifts should slow them down, but the corridor ahead of them rippled as figures in tactical gear began to materialize. Bill yanked her into a side passage just as weapons that definitely weren't standard issue discharged, leaving scorch marks in reality itself. Please tell me you have a plan, he shouted as they ran multiple plans across several probability matrices. She grinned. Despite the danger, though, I have to admit the ones where we survive are statistically less likely, not helping. They burst through another barrier, and suddenly they were back in the desert next to his truck. The research station shimmered like a mirage behind them. Drive. Zelia slammed her hand on the dashboard, activating modifications. Bill still didn't understand. The engine roared to life with that impossible sound he was starting to get used to as they peeled away in a spray of sand. Bill risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The air behind them rippled as vehicles began emerging from the quantum pocket, sleek black SUVs that moved just a little too smoothly to be entirely of this world. So he said as Zelia pushed the truck well past the laws of physics about those survival probabilities. Currently calculating, her fingers danced across the modified controls. Though I should note that your presence continues to alter expected outcomes in fascinating ways. Meaning that statistically impossible things keep happening when you're involved. She shot him a quick smile that made his heart do quantum physics, like an observer falling in love with the observed. Before Bill could process that casual bombshell, something hit them from behind the truck, shuddered as reality warped around it. They're using quantum tethers. Zelia's voice took on an edge of real concern. If they lock on completely, they can drag us back into their probability matrix. In English, we need to get them off our tail, or they'll literally erase us from this timeline. Great, just great. 2 weeks ago, his biggest worry was paint colors, and now he was trying to avoid being quantum erased, while an alien he was falling for tried to drive them through a dimensional rift. Speaking of which, you love me, really? Zelia yanked the wheel hard, narrowly avoiding what looked like a tear in space-time. You want to discuss complex emotional quantum entanglement. Now, well, we might be about to get erased from reality. So she laughed, that musical sound. He'd grown addicted to humans, always picking the most dramatic moments for emotional revelation. Her golden eyes met his briefly. But yes, against all probability calculations and several universal constants, I appear to have developed what you would call feelings for you. Another impact rocked the truck. The pursuing vehicles were gaining reality, sorting around them like heat waves on asphalt. Any chance those feelings include a plan to get us out of this? Actually, her expression turned mischievous. Remember how I said the stasis chamber signal was what led them to us? Yeah, well, what if we could use that same signal to create a quantum feedback loop? Her fingers blurred across the dashboard. We might be able to overload their tethers, and less science, more survival. Right? Short version, hold on to something. The story continue.